I'm Jo Kadlacek. Thank you all for coming to our press conference before our big event on investing in the community, the intersection of nonprofits and for-profits. So we're glad that we have both real reporters and aspiring reporters here to talk about a couple of issues that I think we're going to hear later in our panel discussion in the actual event. But I wanted to just preface it first by saying, you know, at Gordon College, we are really pretty much a reflection of what this kind of discussion is about. As a nonprofit who partners with a lot of for-profits and other nonprofits, it becomes really imperative that we figure out how to do that better to serve our communities. And so I'm really grateful for this opportunity to get to hear from some folks who are in the trenches, who are doing some really innovative and creative things, and that will, I'm sure, inspire us to think better about how we can serve the North Shore. So here's how our press conference is going to work. I'm going to ask Ted Wood, who's a professor here in business and economics, to come up and kind of give a framework for the event itself. Then I'll ask Dave Wellborn, who's the president of the Essex County Community Foundation, to come up and talk for 2 minutes about nonprofits on the North Shore. And then I'll ask the rest of our panelists who will be presenting later to give a kind of a sense of the challenges and issues that they're facing in their own organizations, but also perhaps some success stories as well, some things that could be taken and duplicated just about anywhere. Okay, and then once they've given their kind of 2-minute overview, whatever, we'll open it up for questions about maybe they've thrown out some ideas or that made you wonder about some other topics or questions or struggles, or especially in an economy like ours, how can we work together to make sure that that our nonprofits and for-profits are helping each other out? So that's kind of the agenda for today for our press conference, and so I'll give it over to Ted Wood, and then Dave Wellborn will come up, and then as you come up, each of you come up, just introduce yourselves and the organizations you're a part of, and then we'll open it up for questions, okay? So thanks again for coming. Ted.
Well, I'll take less than 2 minutes to just say 2 things. One is that the Center for Nonprofit Studies grew out of the longtime interest in having students at Gordon. We like to think 100% of our students work in nonprofit organizations. Of course, their vocation may not be in nonprofits, but it may. But if they work in a for-profit arena, we'd like those students to, as they graduate and go through life, to find opportunities to serve on boards and community organizations in their churches, as volunteers, as I said, as board members, working in nonprofits. The way this event came about, that intersection, or maybe it's going to end up being intersections of nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations, came up because some of us in the Economics and Business Department worked on the development of the nonprofit minor in nonprofit management and philanthropy. And we also related to the Career Services Office and the advisory board to the Career Services and Cooperative Education, and we said, isn't there a connection between nonprofits and for-profits, and shouldn't we be talking about those things? So over a long period of time, the advisory board, along with Pam Lazarakis in the Career Services Office, and I and a few others had some conversations, and here we are today, looking at those ways that nonprofits and for-profits can work together. So there, less than 2 minutes. Wow. Maybe, I don't know.
Ted's right about eventual trusteeship. I hope you all will. There are so many good causes out there. It's a wonderful thing to do. It's a good antidote to what happens in your other office. And you meet some great people. So The Essex County Community Foundation, like all the 900 community foundations in the country, does three things. We raise lots of money, we give it away as fast and as carefully as we can, and we teach nonprofits how to use it. Now, here's the size of this part of the economy. Nonprofits are businesses too. They run very carefully because they don't produce profit and margin and everything. They're much more careful with the dollar. So, in Essex County, there are 720,000 people. That's 1 out of every 500 Americans lives here. In this county, we have 2,500 nonprofits. Gordon is one of the larger ones. The Open Door is the largest food pantry, I think. But what this means, if we have 2,500 in this small space, most of them are small. Collectively, second nugget, collectively, they produce 12% of our economy. Bigger than construction sector, bigger than technology sector here. It's a major part of our economic life. Nonprofits provide most or all of our environmental stewardship, our music and art and history and heritage organizations, our healthcare, our education, and especially our social and human services, from hunger to housing. The last nugget I would like you all to hear is the figure $300 billion. That's how much Americans are going to give away this year, and did last year and will next year. $300 billion out of our pockets voluntarily, which is the vast majority of giving on this planet. We haven't surveyed other planets yet. That's the equivalent of the economy of the equivalent of the 30th largest economy in the world. That's as much money as Argentina produces. It's as much money as Belgium produces. And it's money that we give away because our society is dependent not on the government for all these things, but on private enterprise and nonprofits for all the cultural and health and all those organizations that you all know are nonprofits. So this day is really important. This program at Gordon is really important. Don't think it's small stuff. It may be small organizations, but it's 12% of our economy and a much bigger part of our life in this country.
So, if you guys will introduce yourselves.
Sure.
And your organization.
I'm Esther Schlorholtz, and I am the Director of Community Investment at Boston Private Bank, and I've never been in a room with so many reporters, so it's a little daunting. Don't all ask questions at once. But it really is great to be here. Boston Private Bank is a $3 billion financial institution and a full-service commercial bank. We have an office, a comparatively new office in Beverly, so I hope you'll have an opportunity to visit there. We also have a very strong commitment to our community investment programs. In the last 10 years, we've done over $520 million investing in, and primarily actually lending in, affordable housing, small businesses, economic development, human and social service, many kinds of loans. And I should say it performs very well, including the many loans that we do to low-income, first-time home buyers, unlike what you hear in the media from all of you, perhaps. We have an outstanding rating from our regulatory agencies, and we have for 10 years now, so we're very engaged in numerous efforts, not just money, because obviously money is not the only thing, but we are involved in financial education, in working with so many organizations on different types of efforts. Small business lending, we work with nonprofits who provide technical assistance to small business owners to help them to get loans. Without that, they probably wouldn't get loans. We work with organizations that do micro business lending. We work with many community development corporations on building affordable housing. So I will go on and on. I just want to, and I won't, but I want to mention just quickly 3 things that I hope you'll come to the program and then you can hear about it more. But we focus we organize our community investment efforts around 3 areas. We consider our business to be about wealth building. Whether it's small businesses, home mortgages, whatever we do, it's about providing people with the opportunity to help themselves to build their wealth. We also focus on community engagement. We know that nonprofits are the ones who really know what's going on in the community, and so therefore, the 3rd element of what we do is to focus on partnerships with nonprofits, for-profits, and government, but primarily nonprofits because of their very deep engagement in the community.
Hey everyone. So my name is Val Buchanan and I work here at Gordon College, and if you haven't seen me before, it's because my main office is down in the city of Lynn, and I think I'm a part of this discussion today because over the last 7 years, Gordon College has been very intentional about creating partnerships with nonprofits and for-profits in the city of Lynn. And it's been my job to think about how to design these partnerships and how to get the max out of them. It's not involving money at all. It's involving human capital, going back and forth and thinking about resources and how we can leverage our resources. And it's a really fun job for me because I get to look at the whole of the community from an aerial perspective, and I think this is a privilege because there's so many of us. After you get out into some occupation, you'll be very busy, 40 hours a week or 70 hours a week or however many hours you're working in one sector or in one area. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not involved in other sectors, and we are fooling ourselves if we just think in silos, for-profits and nonprofits not touching one another, because every individual and community, every community is made up of individuals, and we're going in and out of all of these sectors all of the time. But when we think institutionally, and we think about partnerships on the institutional level between for-profits with one another and nonprofits with one another, and for-profits and nonprofits with one another, we can actually get really innovative and creative and leverage our resources in ways that we never could have when we're just kind of on our own. And so it's been a little bit of a case study for me, being intentional about thinking for 7 years. What do healthy partnerships look like? And how, and in my context, it's with Gordon College resources, meaning mostly students, and sometimes faculty and staff members. How do we engage with the city of Lynn in such a way that our relationships there are for mutual benefit, win-win on both sides? And sometimes, maybe when you're thinking about, we're doing nonprofits, networking with a lot of nonprofits, there's not a rule about that, but we haven't done a lot with for-profits yet. But the best examples I've seen of community development or community transformation have been when people are coming together and they're merging their passions and their shared values and shared interests. And then there's synergy that gets created from that. And communities actually live into that vision and that place of hope. And so when we talk about change and transformation, and a lot of times when we're talking about the work of nonprofits, people are called into that area because they're passionate about homelessness or housing or poverty in some way, and there's some aspect of a nonprofit that they want to give their lives to, so they're on mission. Now, it doesn't mean that people who are working in for-profits aren't on mission as well, but sometimes with very small organizations, you have a few people on staff, and you don't have the amount of skills needed to really execute to the fullest potential your mission. And so partnering with other nonprofits or for-profits is the way to reach that goal. And if you think about what a healthy community is like, it has to be economically viable. You know, if you think about any community that you've been a part of or community that you've drove through or visited, economic vitality has to be a part of that. But there are other factors involved in what makes a healthy community. Some of it has to do with respect, you know, among the individuals living in that community. Some of it has to do with beautiful public spaces or with good education or civic participation. And all of that, I think, is fueled when you have partnering going on all over the place. And it gets very interesting because the lines are going every direction. But in any kind of a community like that, I think people who are living and working in those communities feel the momentum, and they like working and living in those kinds of spaces. And that's when it gets really fun. And so I think partnering is a really important thing to be talking about, and it's probably something that we should decide, hey, more of us need to think about making this our area of study. You know, what makes good partnerships? And I know that there are studies happening about that, but it's a valued thing that we should set aside time and say, hey, let's get good at X, Y, and Z, but let's get good at thinking about how X, Y, and Z can work together. So we're not duplicating our resources and we're actually making it go further for the betterment of our communities and to see them grow and become more and more healthy.
Hi, I'm Julie LaFontaine. I'm the Executive Director of the Open Door in Gloucester. Everyone loves a good investment. Is there anyone in the room who doesn't like a good return on your investment? It was Winston Churchill who said that the best investment that a community can make is to put milk in the bellies of children. And we know that when we put milk in the bellies of children through our programs, that we're making an investment in that child who will become a young adult, who will then become an adult and become part of the workforce. So when we talk about an intersection between for-profits and nonprofits, there's no better place to start than with laying a good foundation of nutrition. What is the Open Door? Can anyone even guess? You've had some clues. The Open Door is a nonprofit organization that works to alleviate hunger in its communities. And we do that by using practical strategies to connect people to good food. Low-income people who may be working but not making enough money to put food on the table. So we use practical strategies to connect those folks to good food. We advocate on behalf of those in need, and we engage the community in the work of building food security. I think that when you think about a food pantry, you might think of canned corn and peanut butter, and we certainly have plenty of those on the shelves. But we make and take a step further with partnerships in this community to make sure that when someone comes to the food pantry, which is the most traditional of hunger relief programs, that they're not only receiving the canned corn and peanut butter, but they're receiving milk and eggs and fresh produce and meat. We have put together some really wonderful partnerships through the years that yields almost 200,000 pounds of donated nutritious product. That's in addition to the numerous canned food drives and the different things that happen that way. So I think that I would love to talk to you more about this. I'd like to invite all of you to come into the forum. And I think really, if I could leave you with one thing, the biggest partnership that we focus on is the third part of our mission, and that is engaging the community. I have some examples of those, but you'll have to come in to hear them.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Lebrano. I work at Electric Insurance Company. We are a small division of General Electric located up here in North Beverly in the Cherry Hill Park. I recently stepped into the position of the director of the site committee, which is our community involvement team at Electric. And our primary focus is working with local charities through different channels, whether it be volunteering time, funds. Some of the groups we work with are the Beverly Food Project, or the Food Project, but a local farm in Beverly. We go out maybe 10 times a year and we'll work the land and bring a bunch of employees. We do team building on site and help promote healthy organic foods and support their mission. Some of the other organizations we work with are the Salem Mission, and we'll gather at least once a month. Several folks will come down, prepare and cook a meal for 100 to 200 people. And we've had a pretty good relationship with them for some time. So our overall goal, though, as I mentioned, is to get local charities or local organizations involved with our own employees. So there are about 15 members of the site team, but our entire company, which is about close to 500 employees, are the ones that are actually getting out there and working with these organizations. So as I mentioned, I've been working with them for 2 to 3 years now, but as of last month, just stepped into this position. So I'm still fairly new and still reaching out to all of our partners and getting to know them and getting to know their mission. So it's been pretty exciting. Thank you.
I'm up. Hi, everybody. My name is Georgina Keefe Feldman, and I'm the Development Director at Northeast ARC, which is part of the Health and Human Services sector of the nonprofit world. We provide services and programs for people with developmental disabilities, but I don't really want to talk about my specific agency. I want to really piggyback on something that David said about maybe you'll go on and you'll be in boards, et cetera, later on in your life. You're young and you're starting out, and I just want to say how important that is to get involved with nonprofits. And there are a lot of good reasons. David mentioned one. You're going to meet some really interesting people. If you believe in lifelong education, and I'm going to guess that you do, you're going to learn a lot about your community or learn about things you never knew even existed. So it just keeps you going. Another thing is that you may pick up a mentor. Now, this may sound kind of self-serving, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I highly recommend it for young people. Find yourself a mentor. And that mentor may not be in your ultimate place of business. It may be, you know, on a board that you're working with. The other thing is you can find your passion. Not all of us wind up in jobs that we're just thrilled to go to every day. I am, but not everybody is. Sometimes you wind up, you know, in a job that's, but you have a passion. So maybe your passion is opera. You're not working for an opera company. You're working for, you know, the ABC company. But you could go to that local opera company and be on their advisory board or their board. You could really find your passion. And you can use your skills. I'm presuming that most of you are good writers. Do you know how hard that is to find in the world, let alone in nonprofits? They are always looking for good writers. You can help shape the story so that what's going out there in the press is really hitting people in the heart, which is where you want to hit them. And then finally, and this sounds really self-serving, but I'm going to say it anyway, you're going to help your career. And you know what? What is wrong with that? You know, that is actually a good thing. You're going to help your career because you're going to meet some movers and shakers. You're going to get educated. People are going to know who you are. And I'll just tell you one little story. There are nonprofit boards and there are for-profit boards. And the big difference between the two is that they pay you when you're on a corporate board. Now, I've never been that lucky, but I have many friends that are on corporate boards. And I was having a discussion a couple of years ago with a friend of mine, and I mentioned that a mutual friend of ours had just been invited to join a corporate board, and wasn't that great, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, you know, I'm a smart guy. Why doesn't anybody ever ask me to be on a corporate board? And you know what the answer was? Because nobody knows who you are. He had never volunteered for a thing in his life. And he was not a rainmaker. I don't know anybody who's on a corporate board today who hasn't already proved themselves on a nonprofit board, in most cases boards. So by the time you get to be on the board of an insurance company or a mutual fund or whatever, you already have a huge track record of being someone who can get things done. So those are my words of advice. I don't know if it fits right in, but when I see young people, I feel I have to say these things. Thank you.
What I'd like to do now is open it for questions. We've heard about housing, hunger. We've heard about banks, engaging the community, education, healthy options, nutrition. I mean, there's lots that we've gone over in terms of a lot of issues and specific areas. And so I wanted to now throw it open to you to see if you have a specific question for one of our specific speakers, or if you want them to expand on something that perhaps they threw out and got you thinking about something else. What happens to a nonprofit if it takes in more money than it gives out? How does it balance out its mission versus the contributions, and how do we best understand what that means, right? Fair enough. Dave?
Let me try for a minute, and our colleagues here can add to that. American tax law for the last century has given advantages to organizations that are more about their mission than about their profit, simply put. That doesn't impugn companies that make money, because that's what makes the world go round, and that's how we grow our standard of living. But a nonprofit which does not end the year with money left over that goes back to shareholders or goes into the value of the company, does so because if there is a surplus, it's also a nonprofit that knows that it hasn't solved its problem yet, whether it's medical research or hunger or economic development in a city that needs help or whatever it is. That's not a problem that goes away. So if we end up with a surplus at the end of the year, it goes right back into that mission, and we do more. We hire more people to do it. We make more grants. We invest in more education, whatever it might be. It just helps us grow. So we try to produce a surplus every year because we want to do more of this next year. But we don't pay taxes in exchange for promising that we're not giving money back to shareholders. We're going to reinvest everything in the community. So you see a hospital that has a margin of several $1 million at the end of the year, for instance. What they're going to do with that is buy another MRI, hire 3 more nurses, fix up the emergency room, that sort of thing. Does that help?
Yep.
Julie, if you end up with more money at the end of the year, what are you going to do with it at the open door?
Well, I think actually in your opening remarks, you made a good point, and that is we are charitable businesses. And I don't think there's a business in the world that you would expect to run without a little bit of positive cash flow. Even for our individual finances, they suggest that you have 3 months, 6 months, a year set aside for living expenses. And I think that we at the Open Door really try to keep the money out in front of the programs. If we're going month to month just keeping the lights on, we're not much more stable than the clients we're serving. So we do plan for a positive cash flow so that we can turn around and invest it back into the community. That's the plan, and the best laid plans of mice and men in this economy. But thank goodness we have something set aside, because how many people have lost a job and gone more quickly through their nest egg than they had intended? And it's those very people that are coming for our services. So we have actually a policy of putting aside 5% of our fundraising every year into a rainy day fund. And that is very conservatively invested so that we have that there if there ever is a shortfall.
Right.
Just one quick thing too, just because an organization is a nonprofit and their goal is not to make money, it doesn't mean that they don't operate on good business principles. I'm a part of a board of a nonprofit in Lynn. It's about 25 people or so on staff, about $1 million budget per year, and with an endowment of about $3.5 million. So we're drawing down from the endowment, and we're doing all of the things that you would do if you were a for-profit company. But at the end of the year, if there's a little bit left over, it's going into capital, repairs to the building and other things like that. The executive director doesn't get extra $90,000 in the salary, as a bonus at the end of the year if there's, extra money.
Okay. Alyssa, did you?
Yeah, my question was, anyone can answer it. How do you go about creating government awareness and involvement to advocate for the change that your organizations want, whether that's hunger awareness or community development, and where are specific examples that you've seen that change happen?
I'd like to take that. I can give you a concrete answer. Just last year,
We're a very, very large nonprofit. We provide services to 10,000 people. We have over 600 employees, and we are heavily reliant on government funds, contracts for our people who are very much in need of services. They're in wheelchairs, they have developmental, physical disabilities, they're deaf, etc. As you well know, Massachusetts, along with just about every other state in the union, is having severe financial difficulties. Everybody's budget is being cut. Ours has been cut many, many times. And just to get back to that previous question, ending up with a profit at the end, that's everybody's dream. So many times we end up in a deficit. But anyway, last year, we were facing really, really critical cuts that would have meant us stopping our van transportation program. You see the vans all over the North Shore. People get to our day services or to competitive jobs. Autism programs, early intervention, things that actually save taxpayers money. All of these things were on the chopping block. We spent, meaning our board, family members, staff members, a considerable amount of time going into Boston, meeting with our state legislators. There were people, we had a vigil in front of the governor's office for 3 weeks. This was a statewide effort. People in wheelchairs and just meeting with staff members day in and day. They were there from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5. It was a huge effort. And we had most of those draconian cuts restored so we can continue. And, you know, you'd take a big sigh of relief. But now we have to start doing it all over again for the coming budget. So that's one way.
I guess more so thinking about policy change as well, not just the financial, but going as students here, how do we go about creating policies that will affect how the financial sector is spent, but also further than that, not just wanting to focus on how money is spent, I guess, if that makes sense.
I'd like to speak to that. I have a very current example as well. It's on the federal level. The child nutrition programs are up for reauthorization. They're reauthorized every 5 years, and when that process starts happening, it usually starts a year and a half prior to the actual passage, the actual reauthorization. And there are many listening posts and places where you can go and the USDA comes out and listens to your input. We as nonprofit leaders make sure that our voices are raised there. I actually just attended a policy conference in Washington, D.C. It's the Food Research and Action Center Anti-Hunger Policy Conference. You can't say that very quickly, but it is FRAC, which shortens it up just a little bit. Actually, right here in District 6, Congressman Tierney is on a key committee for the reauthorization of these programs. So certainly his office was one that I hit. We have relationships with him here in the district, but it's really great to make sure that you're going down and getting the recommendations, not just for funding, and just so you know, it needs $1 billion. That's billion with a B. My face gets very hot just saying a number that big. And yet I know much larger numbers are thrown around out there for much less worthy things. So I marched down there, and we do have recommendations to make sure that in these child nutrition programs, which include school lunch and summer lunch and the WIC program and the after-school feeding programs, that there are changes being made so that the paperwork is easier, the reimbursement process is more streamlined, making sure that more kids can be connected with the programs. And so we do make recommendations, and we've had some big wins. We have some fruit and vegetable programs that have been expanded to most states now, increasing the consumption of fruits and vegetables through the school system, through the summer lunch program. But there is a whole career in policy writing.
I have a question if none of you are going to jump in just yet. And it's for our two business people, Robert and Esther. I mean, it's no secret, as we've all said, that the economy has affected all of our businesses and nonprofits and lives, basically. So I'm just wondering how, I mean, this probably isn't a great question for me as a PR person to be asking, so I'll pretend I'm a reporter right now. I'm wondering how the economy has affected the choices you've made about investing in the communities with your nonprofits. If you've had to find more creative ways to work with specific mission groups or agencies, or if you've wanted to, if you've had to cut back, I mean, how has the economy affected what you've been doing?
Well, in the past, we had a certain amount of funds that were allocated for each group that we worked with. They've shrunken slightly over the last year. But our approach was, we don't necessarily have to write a check to someone or provide them with a financial commitment. We call them and just say, hey, is there anything going on that we could help with? A lot of these organizations have events, they have walks, they have charitable dinners, and even if it means sending 3 or 4 people over to help set up tables and chairs and just come in and say, is there anything we can do? We'll help out. It usually makes a difference. It's enough for them to say, please do, come on down. I mean, any little bit can help. So we've done that. We've taken that approach in the past, and that seems to work for us. And in previous years, I know certain groups have come to us and said, hey, can you help us out with this? In the past, if we were able to, we would. Now we have to be a little bit more careful with some of the decisions we make, but for the most part, we try to substitute money with volunteer hours.
We also had budget issues and had a budget cut in our contributions area, but instead of cutting the area that I work with in community investment, they actually took the money away from the rest of the business areas and gave us an increase. The reason being that the need was so much greater and the nonprofits were struggling so much more. So that last year we actually had a significant increase, and then they kept that again this year. So we were really pleased with that. And we tried to give it out as quickly as we could. So this was during the really, really tough times when everybody was so fearful as well. We have, since we're a mid-size or comparatively small bank with all the behemoth banks that are in Boston, we also have long worked to provide all kinds of other support to nonprofits and not just money, because we could never compete with the Bank of Americas and others. So we have one of the, I think it's more beneficial programs we've done for many years is a social investing series program. We work with nonprofit organizations sometimes to highlight their work and to bring in potential new friends for them. We're not allowed to do fundraising for them, but we can do friend raisers, so we do that. We also build capacity for those groups. So we've partnered with the Lawyers Clearinghouse, a terrific nonprofit that helps, gives pro bono services to nonprofit organizations from amazing legal counsel. And we provide lots of seminars on multiple topics that help to build the capacity of those organizations. Many examples, but it is it's been a really rough time. Mm-hmm. And as you know, everybody also hates banks right now, even though it was only a few of the large banks and that caused all the trouble, and frankly, it destroyed all of us, not destroyed us. No. Thank you very much. But it's been really hard on the smaller banks, just really hard. They've borne the brunt of what those few large institutions and the lack of appropriate regulation and lack of oversight that occurred. And so it's been a really terrible struggle, but we have built strong partnerships. I will say there have been a few conflicts created by it because we weren't able to do everything we could as we could before. But we've tried our hardest to keep up with everything and actually to do more.
Oh. Yes?
Thank you. Okay. In the spirit of profits. How would you say your nonprofits benefit in this economy? Do they profit from anything, or how can they profit in the future? Do you see them profiting in the future from the economy that is not so hot right now? Or do you see any future successes on the way that you can let us in on?
So you mean in general, just what's the status of nonprofits? And
So are you asking the future? You're asking them to speculate on the future here?
Of your nonprofit specifically.
Well, I'll just say, before I hand it over to you, you'll have a much more thorough answer. I won't talk about Gordon here, but I serve on multiple boards in the city of Lynn, so I've seen various kinds of responses and reactions to the financial crisis. There have been some nonprofits in Lynn that have had to close their doors because the funding dried up. A lot of nonprofits function because they apply for different cycles and series of grants that come out, and they contract with the state or the federal government to provide services. Tracking with the new ways that those monies will be given out or what the new requirements will be is a big part of the job of the nonprofits, to be able to think about the future. How often does this contract come out? If it comes out every 5 years or 10 years, where is the money going? Where's the emphasis now? What are the conversations on Capitol Hill in Massachusetts and in the state, in the nation's capital? So needing to stay current on what the trends are, and then if your organization doesn't have capacity, aligning with other nonprofits and merging. That's a big trend right now, nonprofits combining and forming new entities out of, several smaller nonprofits in order to survive.
So I do think that you hit the nail on the head with trend, making sure that you're staying with the trend. How is our nonprofit specifically benefited from this economy? The trend is to really focus on basic need. And so people who can still give have been giving to basic need: food, shelter, heat, the very, very basics. On Maslow's hierarchy of need, the things at the top aren't as important as they maybe once were in this economy. I think another way that we've benefited is that we have learned to work smarter. We have worked more with other nonprofits, as Valerie mentioned, and we've really thought strategically about how we can leverage every single dollar for the most service. And I think the third way that we've learned to benefit from this economy is to really focus in on maybe some of the things, some of our funding partners, similar to what you said, maybe you're not giving the dollars, but maybe there's a project that you can help with. And we have actually really increased our volunteer service. We handle over 13,000 volunteer hours a year. It's nearly 8 full-time equivalents in hours. And we've really put some resources behind making sure that there's a volunteer coordinator there to make sure that there is a meaningful experience that happens when folks come. They're not just moving this pile from here to here, but they feel good about it. Then they're engaged with the organization and they become individual donors. Maybe their corporations can't give like they used to, but the volunteers become individual donors. They may give $25 because that's what they can give, but if 100 people give $2,500, you've made it up. So, and you've engaged folks who will grow with the organization.
Okay, and I think we have time for one more question. So, we've got 3. So, was someone
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Were you going to say something?
Well, I'll just be very brief. Okay. And I will speak about Gordon. To the students here, there's no surprise that the enrollment is down just a little bit. You may have some friends who weren't able to come back because of personal financial problems. But about a decade or maybe 2 decades ago, when there was a similar financial struggle for the college, one of the faculty members stood up in a faculty meeting. He's now retired, so I can talk about him. And he said, I think that we do our most creative and innovative thinking about how to deliver an excellent educational experience for students when times are a little more difficult. So the creativity, the innovation, the good things happen in hard times. And as a friend of mine on campus just said, yeah, financially, there's a little bit of a rough patch here, as he described it. And he's a finance guy, he called it a rough patch. The college is stable, and we're looking forward to increasing enrollment. But during those times when it's a bit of a struggle, it does take some innovation. It causes some innovation and careful thinking, and that's a good thing.
Good. Last question, Amanda.
I'm going to tag one more thing on
sorry.
that.
Sorry.
In my particular branch, Human Services, it's way more than a rough patch. In many cases, it's a disaster. Fundraising is way down, and the budget news is not good. So everybody's working really, really hard. Most people are doing 2 or 3 jobs. But I don't really want to focus on the negative because there are a couple of good things. There are very little staff turnover. I mentioned we have over 600 employees. Right now, anybody that has a job, they're not leaving because it's, the job market is not great. So that, and usually we have a pretty high staff turnover because our jobs are difficult, they're not well paid, they're extremely demanding, and there's some really wacky hours because we have all kinds of 24-hour residences and that sort of thing. The other thing is that we completely aren't doing anymore is that up until 2 years ago, we went overseas looking for people. We were bringing in people from the Philippines and all of the Slovakias and that whole region and training them. It was a big investment, and they worked out great. It's been wonderful, but the reason we had to do that in years past is because we couldn't find Americans to take the jobs. Not really a problem anymore. I just thought I'd share that with you.
Okay, last question. So whomever has the microphone.
We were talking a little bit about, a lot about the economy and finance, and we talked a little bit about volunteering as well. I think that was you who had mentioned the volunteering on an individual level, but what's something, this is for anyone to answer, what's something that for-profit organizations can do besides giving money?
As I mentioned, I'll just be brief. As I mentioned before, we try to take that approach with all of our organizations. Being a for-profit organization, we're always looking for ways, selfishly, looking for ways we can provide our own employees with team building and outlets that bring people from different parts of the business together. And these chances give us the best opportunity to do that. So we'll go out and just, like I said, we'll tap an organization and say, is there something we can do? We've got a dozen or so employees that want to come out and work the farm or serve dinner or stock shelves or deliver food, Meals on Wheels, et cetera. So it sort of echoes what I said before.
We also expanded our volunteerism program a lot. We had every employee has the ability to go out and get paid 8 hours a year to go out and volunteer for a nonprofit of their choice. And we were really pleased. This year we did, we ended up with, I think we have about 310 employees. We're not that big of an institution, but we ended up at about 16 hours per employee. Now that actually means that only about 100 employees do a lot, and a couple hundred don't. But it's a really amazing record to be able to see how that increased. We were really lucky that we didn't have to lay off anybody. So while the economy was down, while the capital markets were frozen, and it was a really rough ride, the bank really encouraged people to become more engaged in the community, and it was a really exciting time. Made people much happier about their jobs, about themselves. Many of them have joined boards and committees and ongoing relationships. So I'd highlight that as one of the most exciting things that we're doing recently.
And we like happy, don't we? We like happy. We like happy. And I actually think you'll hear more stories if you do get to stay. So we invite you to stay for the next part of this, for the extended seminar, but thank you so much, panelists, for taking the time with this press conference. This has been recorded, so we do have that available if you are interested in having something at the end. In probably a couple weeks, we'll have it done. So thank you again, all of you, for coming. And you're